What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch. Today, I wanted to dig into a conversation that I think has had some support and even a lot of evidence to show that the Overwatch cover girl is quite a powerful character and perhaps even the most powerful character in all of Overwatch. I think over time, there's been communities that have definitely wanted to see Tracer get nerfed or changed. And as we know, there's reworks and more balance changes that are going to be coming down the pipeline. And I think it was a good time to bring up the issue that Tracer presents for all levels of play, pro play and matchmaking play alike. So first, let's lay down some evidence. In ranked matchmaking, most, I would say, of the top 500 players that reach really high highs into the ranked matchmaking system play Tracer. We'll explain why in a sec, but moving one step further, in the organized team environment, so Overwatch League and all the other Tier 2 events, Tracer is among the top picked characters in the entire game. And of course, throughout the ranks in matchmaking as well, many a support player has felt helpless against the constant harassment that Tracer can put on a backline and potentially carry the game. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean she's overpowered just because all those things are true, but I want to unpack why those things are true. The reason why Tracer is so good at both top 500 to carry games outright in solo queue, and as well one of the most picked DPS characters in the Overwatch League, is because Tracer is the only character, I think, in the entire game that does everything that an Overwatch hero could need to do, while also being self-sufficient. That's a very important term, self-sufficient. What I mean by that is, because Tracer has the rewind mechanic that sort of heals herself, and has the best movement in the game so she can get to health packs anyway. And if you're really sick with that movement, nothing in the game can stop you, really. You have the opportunity to dodge everything. Tracer has the opportunity to actually carry. There's other heroes that have the potential to do this as well. I think the closest one that I can think of is Widowmaker. But the issue is when you compare Tracer to Widowmaker, there's a lot of drawbacks to Widowmaker. There's a much more higher cost mechanically to be able to perform on Widow. But of course, as we all know, if you go on one of those sick tears, you can carry the game utterly by hitting multiple headshots in a row. But even with that, Widow can't have point presence, whereas Tracer can. That's another important Overwatch term. It goes back to the other things that I was saying, that Tracer does everything. She can stall objectives. She can mingle in and fight with the tanks that would just eat up a Widowmaker if she tried to jump on the payload. And it's for all these reasons that Tracer can find herself carrying matchmaking games and feeling like a must pick in pro play, where there really isn't a lot of one hero specialists in pro play, but there are Tracer specialists, and you definitely need an ace Tracer to compete on a lot of maps, otherwise you're gonna have a really hard time. Because in pro level play, the best Tracers are so good at using her movement, it's not even aim at this point, which is another subject, but are so good at their movement that they can have a presence wherever they need to be in the fight. Eddie did a great video about Sabiolbi and how he takes over the game that way, and that's with SBB's aim not being nearly as good as some of the other Tracers, which brings up an important point, something I was thinking about, and I heard Muma said it on the Oversight podcast as well, that Tracer's far more about her movement than it is her aim, which is, I think, somewhat problematic, and it doesn't necessarily have to conclude that she needs a nerf, but it's a little bit worrisome when one of the most powerful characters in the game is utterly movement-based, and the aim required to play Widowmaker or McCree or whatever, even Roadhog, against a Tracer is such a lopsided mechanical battle that unless you're actually Pine on McCree, you're gonna find Tracer way more powerful than you are. And this is somewhat okay, because at the same time, Tracer doesn't need much synergy, but she also doesn't benefit from much synergy. Yeah, she can put pulse bombs on grabs, everybody can follow up on a grab, and her and Zenyatta have a great synergy because she can chase down the Discord orbs, and the low amount of healing is exactly what she needs. But just as much, that self-sustaining style limits her applicability in some ways, which is important to remember, because if we even think about nerfing anything about Tracer, that's going to be an issue. Other characters in the game have more interdependence than Tracer does. And in some ways, I think the synergy between characters is actually some of the more beautiful parts about Overwatch. If it was more of a pure shooter game, all of the characters would kind of feel like Tracer and Widowmaker, where everyone has the ability to pop off by themselves. But as we know, that's not really the vision for Overwatch. It's okay that a few of these characters are like that, but I think we see the full extent of team play with all of the other characters, and this became most evident to me when I watched the Outlaws and Dynasty matchup recently, which went to a nail-biting best of 5. But the interesting thing about that series is that neither team had a real elite tracer. And what happens is when an elite tracer isn't in the server in a pro match, the game is so much easier to spectate because the action is right in front of you and the synergies and the plays that are trying to develop are much slower. Whereas Tracer has the movement potential and burst damage impact to be able to come off on an off angle, just one clip somebody, and boom, you're dead. There's no way to know it was coming, so you have to be ready for that level of speed and lethality coming at you at any moment, which often pushes the game into a more dive v dive style, because it takes a ton of teamwork to overcome that individual carry performance that a Tracer can put out, so much so that a lot of teams just mirror the Tracer in order to win that battle, which inherently isn't necessarily a problem either, because there's a lot of matchups in Overwatch that if you don't have a good mirror match, that's a huge aspect of the game that you're probably just going to outright lose. Widow versus Widow, Pharah versus Pharah. Yeah, there are styles and comps that you can play in order to overcome those play styles without having to 1v1 them with the same character, but I would say those two plus Tracer are in the league of DPS heroes that you kind of really want a mirror matchup because the counter pick matchups are much harder to run. So to some degree, this avenue takes me down, well, it's not fair to be picking on Tracer because there's these other powerful DPS characters in the game that if you don't mirror them, you're going to have a hard time. So I laid down the expansive groundwork for this conversation. Tracer quietly has been carrying games for months, and I feel like people really haven't given her the attention and respect that the power in that hero has been bringing to Overwatch for quite some time. Does she need a nerf? Well, the issue is, I think if you nerf anything about Tracer, she almost becomes useless instantly. That's the problem. She's on such a delicate balance of being super good that you can play her in almost every situation. And if you were to say, like, take a blink away, so she only had a capacity for 2 blinks, does she just become unplayable all of a sudden? Possibly. But if we do want to be realistic and think, is there anything that we should be looking to change about Tracer so she isn't so dominant in pretty much all levels of play? I have a few avenues that I would suggest going down, but unfortunately, I think I just end up saying that, well, just the way Overwatch works, Tracer's going to be sick. And maybe that's just the most fair we can make it. But here's a few ideas for you to try on for size. I think there's an issue with the way her spread works, and the point of comparison that I'll make is to another spread hit scan based character, Soldier, who has more nuance on how you have to play him. Now, Soldier makes a bit more sense because he plays at range anyway, so the way his spread works is more intuitive to his play. But of course, there's those 5 shots on Soldier that are accurate to the middle of the crosshair, and then he has a bit of a random spread. So the correct way to aim with Soldier is to go for headshots if you can, with those first 5 shots, and then move your crosshair down to shoot at like the center of mass, because you're going to have a big spread after that point. What this does is give you an option as the player to decide, well, if I want to be really accurate and a target's really far away, I have to burst fire, which gives a hard limit to the amount of burst damage Soldier can do, because if there's a Pharah miles out in the distance, in order to do any meaningful damage as Soldier into that Pharah, you're going to have to burst fire. If you full auto, most of your bullets are going to miss. Now, if we look over to Tracer though, because she has blinks, it kind of doesn't matter that she has this really big spread, because she can pretty easily get close enough for almost all of those bullets to hit. So much so that a lot of even pro players don't have to aim for the head a lot of the time. When you're in these medium range Tracer battles, they can just aim at the center of mass all the time, and the spread will more or less spread out to be able to hit the majority of the hitbox. Now, of course, tracking on Tracer while doing all this crazy movement takes an insane amount of skill anyway, so ultimately we might just fall on the fact that it's not even fair to try to nerf this playstyle away from these really sick players, in the same way that you want your skill on Widowmaker, for instance, to be viable in the game. But at the same time, I do feel it's a little bit problematic that Tracer gets her full potential almost fully out of her movement, and there isn't nearly as much nuance in the way she has to control her spread, because it spreads instantly. Now, how do we go about fixing this? Well, it's nearly impossible, I think. And the devs did an amazing job with balancing her the way she is now. Many would say that she's perfectly balanced, and everything I'm complaining about right now is null and void, which is likely to be the case. But let's think about it. These things get really nerdy with the way that the damage profiles work, and the developers did an amazing job, honestly, with balancing a lot of these characters so that they work in the different situations you need them to work with. Like, when Tracer's right up close to McCree, her spread is like his entire head. And when you're at kind of a medium range, the spread is perfectly fit to Roadhog's head, which makes for really tight, engaging gameplay, I think. But I wonder if there's a way where we could rework the Tracer spread to work a bit more like Soldier, where it would reward better aim and fall off more with worse aim. Because like I said, currently, you don't really have to go for headshots most of the time, and you can do a lot of work on Tracer. So perhaps, maybe if there was a burst firing mechanic with Tracer, where it was a little bit more accurate if you shot in like 3-shot bursts, for instance, but if you went full auto, the spread got even worse than it is now, meaning that if you're really close into kissing distance, let's say, you can still one-clip that Zenyatta one way or the other, but when you're in those medium range poke battles where Tracer's just constantly harassing, it'd be much harder to get meaningful damage done while full auto spraying and praying. Now maybe that's not the best idea, but I think it's down the line that I would like to see Tracer go with, because it's so incredible to watch these players like Carpe, Effect, Sinatra is really famous as well, have these incredibly fast reaction times and just mow down everything in front of them. I think I would just like to see a bigger opening for mechanics to matter even more, because despite those players being sick, I think SBB is the best Tracer in the world, and I don't think his aim is as good as those players, but he doesn't need to be, because it's all about the game sense and your movement as Tracer, which makes her, I think, a little bit easier than she should be for the amount of power that you get out of the character overall. The other route that we could look down is possibly playing with her cooldowns a little bit. I think that is a minefield though, and very easily could make her useless, so I don't even really have any ideas for that. But what I will say is the other option to go is they could look into changing her movement animations and the way she kind of leans and crouches and the speed that she can do so. And even a small adjustment in that regard would allow characters like McCree to hit shots on her without needing a flashbang. Because honestly, unless you're one of the best McCrees in the world, I don't know how you hit even a decent Tracer at your level. It's quite difficult, and it has been for a long time. And that ultimately might be the only option to see some of these other skill shot characters compete with a movement-based one like Tracer, because even if they do the things that I said about changing the spread, the best Tracers will still outplay McCree. There's like no way around it. She has all the tools to beat anybody, basically, which is cool on one end, but also something that I think was worth this prolonged discussion here today. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comment section down below. Does Tracer need a nerf? And if so, what things would you like to see changed in her kit? If you enjoyed the video and you found it useful, please leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please subscribe, because we upload each and every day, so you're going to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link in the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.